We have a great show lined up for you here on Retiring Well. Going to be first starting about don't DIY your retirement plan. Maybe you've seen some of those do-it-yourself shows of remodeling a house. That maybe works for some, but what about your retirement plan? Along with that, the cost of living crisis and retirement. We're all seeing the cost of goods going up significantly. What impact does that have on your retirement? Along with that, 401k mistakes that job hoppers make. So if you've had a multitude of jobs over the years and different retirement plans, what are those mistakes that you might be making within there? And then lastly, how to turn $500,000 into passive income. How do you structure a retirement portfolio to then generate that income that you may want in retirement? So all this and a whole lot more coming up right here on Retiring Well.
Retiring Well, brought to you by Centennial Wealth Advisory, financial advisors specializing in retirement planning and serving all of Northern Michigan. Retiring Well, helping you plan for a successful and comfortable retirement. Retiring Well, plan to retire well.
If you have a leak under your kitchen sink, do you try to fix it yourself or do you call a plumber? You know, do you get down there and clean out that cabinet and watch YouTube videos on how to do it yourself, make a run to the hardware store, try to get the parts, spend an entire weekend, and maybe you get it fixed, or maybe you spend an entire weekend doing that and realize you still have a leak. You know, there's a lot of people who are do-it-yourselfers, whether that's fixing their kitchen sink or managing their own money. I've worked with hundreds of clients over the years, and I've worked with clients who are totally, up until that point anyway, have been do-it-yourself investors. I've also worked with clients who had 2 or 3 financial advisors that they had worked with either at the same time or previously in their experience with managing money. So whether you're still working or you are already retired, there's a lot of things to consider when thinking about your retirement, where your income's going to come from, and whether or not you should try to do it yourself. The closer you get to retirement, there's some specific things you need to start thinking about. 2 of those areas are taxes and also estate planning, so end-of-life planning. Once you no longer have an income from your job, you know, you need to look at the way to pull that income from a tax-efficient standpoint. What's the best strategy? What's the best way to do that? And that really takes looking at your accounts, whether that's a 401k, an IRA, a Roth IRA, or a brokerage account. You need to evaluate your current options with your different accounts, what the tax implications are, and what is the best strategy to pull that income year in and year out while you're in retirement. Another advanced strategy to consider with regards to your taxes is Roth conversions. You know, do they make sense for your situation? Should you consider doing them? If so, how much should you convert each year? What's the best balance of tax, you know, I guess, options with regards to what you might owe, but then versus the benefits. So you got to weigh out the pros and cons with those. Another challenge really to trying to do this yourself as a DIY investor is that tax rules and tax law changes, whether they have already happened or their potential tax law changes. So you got to think about in the future how that might impact your current situation. You know, questions I think to consider if you are a do-it-yourself investor are, you know, how many retirements have you successfully planned? Is it worth trying to DIY something that is this important? You know, especially obviously you've never done it before. And I'm trying to have a little fun here, but it is important. You know, if you've obviously never planned a retirement before, if this is your first retirement that you're planning for yourself, you know, would you ever work with an advisor who has no experience planning for retirement other than their own personal retirement? You know, that's technically what you're doing if you're looking at this from being a DIY investor or DIYing your own retirement plan. You know, you've never done it before, and there's a lot of things to consider, as I mentioned before: tax rules, tax law changes, estate planning. You know, a big thing when we think about estate planning is a challenging area to try to do on your own, really, right? Because you need to make sure that you have all the correct estate planning documents set up. any trust that you might need to have set up in place. It's important to ensure that your spouse will be taken care of when something happens to you. It's also important to understand that you have, your tax smart distribution. So you're set up the accounts in such a way that your beneficiaries the most, right? So it's minimizing the taxes that they're going to have to pay. Even after I've shared all this information, you might be saying, Virgil, that's great, I appreciate it, but I feel comfortable and confident that I know how to pull income and retirement in the most tax efficient way. I feel comfortable and confident about being able to keep up with all the tax rules and tax law changes. I also feel comfortable from an estate planning standpoint that I have what I need set up and that I'm going to be able to transfer the wealth successfully to my beneficiaries. And if that's you, I have a question for you. Does your spouse or significant other have that same knowledge base? Do you really want them trying to navigate this on their own when you pass away? Preparing well for retirement and making wise investment decisions while in retirement is important. We'd be happy to sit down with you for a no cost and no obligation meeting so that we can help you plan to retire well.
You've worked hard. Plan to retire well. The success of your retirement depends on a sound plan. If you are retired or nearing retirement, we invite you to an informative live event to help you plan to retire well. There is no cost and no obligation, and dinner is on us. We are Centennial Wealth Advisory, financial professionals specializing in retirement planning and serving all of northern Michigan, with offices in Traverse City, Gaylord, Petoskey, and Cadillac. Our presentation will address important topics such as inflation isn't dead yet. How are you protecting your retirement income? Could the looming Social Security shortfall change the course of your retirement? How potential tax changes could affect your retirement income? What impact will the administration changes have on your retirement? Smart estate planning to minimize taxation, and much more. Call 888-608-5825 or register online and choose the date and location that works best for you. Wednesday, May 7th at Soralina in Traverse City. Tuesday, May 13th at the Stafford's Perry Hotel in Petoskey. Wednesday, May 14th at Treetops Hunter's Grill in Gaylord. Wednesday, May 14th at the David L. Eisler Center in Ferris State University in Big Rapids. Thursday, May 15th at Boone's Long Lake Inn in Traverse City. Or Tuesday, May 20th at the Bluefish Kitchen and Bar in Manistee. The live event starts at 6:30 p.m. and is free to attend with a complimentary gourmet dinner to follow, but seating is limited and tends to fill quickly. Call 888-608-5825 or register online to reserve your seats today. Don't miss this important live event to help you plan to retire well.
Cost of living is definitely on everyone's mind. No matter how old or young you are, it likely has affected you in some way. And when you think of cost of living and the thought of retiring, it's starting to get a little more complicated for some folks. Bank of America released their 13th annual workplace study. And during that, it was come about that 67%, so 2/3 of all employees out there right now, fear that the cost of goods or the rising cost of goods overshadows any price or wage increase that they may be receiving. So as you see here on this chart, you see basically over time, the average wage growth in America over about the last 50 years hovers at around 3.9%. So roughly, what that really is saying that is every year, the average wage is growing by about 3.9%. Now, here in August of 2024, that wage growth was slightly higher than average at 4.1%. It peaked recently in March of 2022 with a wage growth of 7%. So for those of you that were still working out there, these are averages. Obviously, some people get bigger increases, some people get less or none, but these are averages over there. So basically, this study is saying 2/3 of all employees are saying, I don't care what I'm getting. These price increases are outweighing any wage increase that I'm getting, so they don't feel the benefit of that increase, right? So it seems like, obviously, as these last several years, especially since the pandemic, we felt the burden of these price increases. Since 2019, or midway through 2019, when we look at prices, most, on average, all goods across things have gone up about 22%, just since 2019. So that's significant when we look over that time. Now, thankfully, here in the later part of 2024, prices seem to have stabilized. Now, costs necessarily aren't definitely not going down, right? But the rate of what they're growing has stabilized off some. Now, if we could get things to function more like TVs, since that same 2019, midway through 2019, television prices have dropped by 33%. So it'd be nice to see some of this other stuff, right, as consumers out there, as we see that going on. So this isn't new. Jumps in cost of living aren't new. We've just been a little spoiled. You know, dating back to kind of the Great Recession, right, the 2008 time period, till up until the pandemic, we were at very low or much below average cost of living, or, you know, seeing these prices increase when we look at like CPI studies and stuff like that. You know, we had some years, actually there was a negative year in there, 1%, 1.5%, numbers like that happened. So we just didn't feel like costs were going up because they were so small and incremental. But when we look back in time, think about the late 70s and the early 80s with the massive price increases we've seen during that time. Even in the later 1980s into the very early 1990s, we've seen pretty rapidly rising rates. But we've just been used to that. So this is nothing new. It just feels, I think, worse because we've kind of been spoiled. So as somebody maybe entering retirement or thinking of retirement during these times, this can be challenging, right? You're seeing these costs. Some people have actually, you know, studies out there are showing that people are lowering their savings rates going in the 401ks and IRA plans. They're either lowering or in some cases even reducing that because they're needing that extra income to make ends meet on the other side of the equation. With these escalating costs of living and the change of priorities, people are putting off of that retirement. So obviously, if you're not saving at the rates you were once more, you know, that can make retirement challenging or moving it off for you in the future. So when you're looking at being retirement ready, sit back, let's look at, this is a great time to look at your spending, look at your budget items before you just automatically chop out those things. Is there other things that can be adjusted? Is there expenditures going out that maybe we could look at, you know, reducing or changing or remodifying somewhere along the line? Can we refinance some debt? Or what does that look like when we get into that? It's interesting how these different costs are starting to come up, which then we see credit card debt rising as well, which isn't great obviously for the consumer because that interest rate is higher right now and all of that. So again, when we look at this sort of thing, you know, retirement used to kind of be at the top of people's mind when you looked at like surveys. There's an employee benefit research institute out there that does surveys all the time. And being retirement ready used to be at the top of that list. And now it's actually these rising cost of goods that's at the top of that concern. So if that's you, it's a great time to stop, take a step back, look through your budget, look through your spending, and just remodify your plan to see where things are at and see how you can plan to retire well.
You've worked hard. Plan to retire well. The success of your retirement depends on a sound plan. If you are retired or nearing retirement, we invite you to an informative live event to help you plan to retire well. There is no cost and no obligation, and dinner is on us. We are Centennial Wealth Advisory, financial professionals specializing in retirement planning and serving all of northern Michigan, with offices in Traverse City, Gaylord, Petoskey, and Cadillac. Call 888-608-5825 or register online and choose the date and location that works best for you. The live event starts at 6:30 p.m. and is free to attend with a complimentary gourmet dinner to follow, but seating is limited and tends to fill quickly. Call 888-608-5825 or register online to reserve your seats today. Don't miss this important live event to help you plan to retire well.
Let us help you guard your golden years in an effort to turn your retirement dreams into reality. Learn about proven strategies to help you combat the impact of falling interest rates and explore attractive alternatives. Simply go to send-wealth.com. Scroll down and click the link Helping to Guard Your Golden Years to receive your free copy of our valuable and informative white paper, Helping to Guard Your Golden Years.
If you like watching Retiring Well, make sure to go to youtube.com/retiringwell and click the subscribe button to never miss any of our TV shows and other informative videos.
Hey, welcome to this segment on 401k mistakes that can happen when you change jobs. The first mistake that might happen is leaving before you're vested. What does it mean to be vested? It means that's when 100% of that 401k is yours. So if there's any employer contributions that have gone into the plan, sometimes they withhold that if you leave too early. Example, let's say there's a 4-year vesting period and year 3.5 you decide to leave jobs. Well, they might withhold some of that match because you're not fully vested. Some companies vest right away, some delay that as a carrot to stay on board. So just look at your vesting schedule. Don't leave money on the table if you can avoid that. The next one is not saving during the waiting period. So sometimes as you transition jobs and you're signing up for the new 401k and so forth, they give you a timeline. They say, hey, you can start contributing in 2 months or 3 months. Some might even wait a whole year. Well, if you're going to wait a whole year before you can be saving in that 401k, then you're going to want to look into other options for savings. Maybe it's a traditional IRA, maybe it's a Roth IRA, maybe even a brokerage account, but keep that saving train rolling. The next mistake that happens are when people are saving less than their employer matches. This is a little bit of an unbelievable statistic to me because 25%, a quarter of the workforce, isn't even saving enough to get the free money match from their employee. About 25% of employees are not saving enough just to get the match that the employer will give. And so look at what those matches are. They can get confusing sometimes with their equations. So ask enough questions until you understand the equation for the match and maybe make that your minimum saving amount. Avoid that mistake. Another thing is sometimes people don't save when their company doesn't have a 401k. And so they're just say, well, they don't offer one, I'm not going to save. And then obviously as you get closer and near retirement, not having a nest egg to pull from is going to be a problem. And so if you don't have a 401k, there are other options that you can save in. As I above mentioned, you have your traditional IRA, your Roth IRA, or maybe even a brokerage account to start that retirement savings plan. Here's one. This is another unbelievable statistics. 40% of employees cash out of their 401k. Now, let's just use an example of what that means. So they move jobs and they say, hey, I have a retirement bucket I can go pull from, and there's nothing captive about it. Well, what could the impacts be? Well, 40% of people are doing this. So let's just use an example. Let's say you had a $50,000 401k and you went to cash it out. And let's say that you were in the 22% tax bracket and you're in the state of Michigan, 4.25 state there. Between taxes, federal and state, that means you'd be walking away with maybe just under $37,000, so $36,875. And if you do it before you're 59 and a half, okay, then you have to pay an additional 10% early withdrawal penalty. And so that would your take home would be $31,875. You started with 50 and you ended with $31,850. That's a costly mistake. So look into your options before you cash it out. There are a lot of options that you can do. And there's some age-based options. If you were working all the way until you were 55 and then you retired from your 401k, you're in a different boat, okay? And you have different decisions that you get to make. Another mistake is failing to shop around what your options are, okay? So, sometimes these employers have 401k plans and they're phenomenal for that phase of people's saving. And so you could maybe potentially keep it in the old plan. Maybe you could take those funds and roll those funds into your new 401k plan. Or maybe it makes sense to roll it to a traditional IRA and kind of open up your world of investment options. But you want to look at fees and risks and how that fits into what you're trying to accomplish in your individualized plan. And then finally, you want to avoid that 10% early withdrawal penalty if at all possible. And like I said, there's some age-based rules that could apply to you. It depends on when you retire and when you might want access to those funds. But there are a lot of strategies that you'd want to individualize to your situation so that you can avoid that 10% early withdrawal penalty. And one last bonus, if you are 59 and a half and still working, but you want to look at some different investment options, maybe see if your plan offers what's called an in-service rollover. You keep working, you keep participating, nothing changes, but you can take that chunk of money, roll it over to a traditional IRA, and then open up your world of investments. So I hope this is helpful. I hope you have a great week. Thanks for watching.
I'm Brittany Trout, the Development Coordinator at Habitat for Humanity Grand Traverse Region. And right now we are working on our New Waves project here in Leelanau County. We encompass 2 other counties as well as the Grand Traverse region, which is Kalkaska and Grand Traverse. As you can see, we're on the construction site, and Habitat not only has volunteer opportunities and community partners for the construction side, but also for our restore side. If you're ever interested in getting involved from being a community organization, a church, or an individual, feel free to reach out to us. But I specifically want to tell you about who we have here with us today. We have Centennial Wealth Advisory on site today to help volunteer as a community partner. They are donating their time and having their team out here to help us lay flooring. Currently, the houses we're working on are in their final stages with getting the flooring and then having appliances and countertops installed. As we move on, at this site we hope to have 6 to 7 houses come 2025, and then later on we'll be able to come back to this site and build more homes. Habitat is really well known in the community, and we work together with our friends to give them the chance to have affordable housing. We have homeowners who are not only families, individuals, but they encompass all of that. They can be an individual, a young partner together, or an elderly couple. We accept anyone with meeting in the criteria. We wanted to thank Centennial Wealth Advisory for coming out today, and we hope to have them back in the future.
You've probably heard that phrase, let your money work for you. Well, that's passive income. So I'm going to be sharing with you, if you say have $500,000 or whatever the dollar amount might be, and how to then generate what you call passive income. So again, it's earning money on your money with little to no effort. So let's start talking through, there's several ways to go about this, but you need to consider a lot of different factors. So first off, you can look at fixed income, such as bonds as an example. They may provide you a stable income stream, and they're going to be considered less volatile than stocks. But again, there's a variety of different factors and a variety of different types of bonds and different levels of risk that come along with that, such as municipal bonds, and then with that particular municipality, what risk they have of going bankrupt. There's dividend-paying stocks. These are going to be well-established companies typically that are going to have maybe paying dividends of 25 or greater years. Those are referred to as dividend aristocrats. Examples of those may include McDonald's or Walmart. And then you have stocks increasing dividends over time for, let's say, 50 plus years. These are going to be referred to as your dividend kings. 3M or Procter & Gamble are examples of those types of stocks. Another potential type of passive income involves real estate. although some of you real estate investors may not necessarily consider it passive investment, as I was born and raised here in Traverse City, and my parents owned a 6-unit apartment complex near downtown Traverse City, and when Dad got the call at 9 p.m. that the water heater was broken, and he went to go and work on that, that wasn't necessarily a passive or no responsibility with that, but there's different management companies obviously that you can pay. But there's other different types of real estate investments you can get into, different types of funds that are going to where you can be passive with that, but you want to be cautious of the different risks, especially from a liquidity standpoint. If you want to get your money out of that real estate investment, what's sort of the time frame that you might be looking at there? There's different types of businesses, maybe online businesses where you can collect different subscription fees. Maybe there's laundromats, vending machines. Again, there may be different levels of work expected with that. But be cautious with any business venture, obviously going into it. If it doesn't work out, then you need to be prepared for what that loss might look like. High yield savings accounts. One site you can visit is bankrate.com, and you can look at different high yield savings accounts rates, different CD rates, whatever the different banks are offering out there. And you might be pleasantly surprised if you haven't been paying attention to where interest rates have shifted here over the past couple of years. You want to, again, read through all the details and be cautious before you take any action, and not necessarily passive, but maybe you could turn a hobby into a business. I know several folks that I've known over the years have been able to do different woodworking, there's welding, photography, all sorts of different crafts, and now there's online sites such as Etsy that have made it a lot easier for those self-employed individuals that want to take a hobby and generate some additional income. So the key thing there is find something that you love and you have a passion for, and maybe you can make a little extra income to enjoy during your retirement years. One of the things that we see a lot of people who do a good job saving for retirement, but they don't necessarily know how to turn that money into an income stream. So that's something that here at Centennial Wealth Advisory we specialize in, focusing on retirement planning, looking at how to structure your portfolio to generate an income, and a key piece to keep in mind with that is the taxation of that money. So if you have traditional IRA or 401k funds that you're drawing from, you want to be cautious of what that additional income is going to look like when it comes to the taxes, and how to best structure that. So alongside that, we also then get into communicating on your estate planning and different insurance planning, and how that all comes together as a cohesive plan. So if you're in a situation where you're not quite sure how to go about those next steps of retirement, we'd love to sit down with you, have a conversation, and ultimately help you plan to retire well.